Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 drama. Max Verstappen's team are reportedly angry with the comments of Nico Rosberg during the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix weekends, raising the question again as to whether a Red Bull boycott of Sky Sports Formula 1 could again be on the cards coming up shortly. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. One update to bring you guys is Christian Horner confirming, or well not confirming necessarily, but ruling out for now a move of Lewis Hamilton joining Red Bull. Not like anyone really thought that was going to happen anyway. I don't imagine Hamilton will want to turn his back on Mercedes. I think he'd sooner retire than he would not drive for Mercedes, but who knows, I suppose. Toto Wolff did say that within the next couple of years, if Mercedes can't produce a competitive car, then Hamilton should look elsewhere. But look, crazy things happen in Formula 1. And also from the Red Bull side, do they want Hamilton alongside Verstappen, given the way their team is structured? Perez is doing a good enough job in that second driver's seat. Red Bull probably don't want that tough competition between two drivers. They'd probably prefer to have the situation they currently have. And his comments were, what Lewis has achieved in Formula 1 are second to none. We are very happy though with the drivers we have. Of course, he's not going to say on national telly, yeah, would get rid of Perez for Hamilton in a heartbeat. They're committed as a pair, not only for this season, but for next season as well. So we wouldn't be able to accommodate him, and we're not writing off Mercedes yet because they're going to sort their issues out at some point or another. So just one quick comment on that, because I don't really think anyone expected it, but Horner has turned it down or ruled out the possibility. But as I say, remarkable things have happened in Formula 1. The other key story of the day is around the cost cap here in Formula 1. Many unintended consequences, I think, of this cost cap coming into play. Theoretically, it has helped close the gap amongst the grid. If you look back to 2014, the gap between the pole time and the slowest car on the grid, we're talking something like 6-7 seconds it was back then. Today, the gap in Bahrain between the pole car and the slowest car on the grid that went out in Q1 was something like 2.5 seconds. So the grid is much closer today. It probably will continue to be so, but Red Bull's gap is pretty mega, and the cost gap does mean Mercedes and Ferrari do have a much harder time catching up maybe than they would have done previously. However, the other problem is for the smaller teams catching up from a technical kind of capital expenditure perspective. There's the 140 odd million cost cap per year. Teams want to put that into the actual season, right? They want to put it into development and costs for that year. If they want to develop infrastructure outside of, well, the cost cap itself, they can't really do so right now. So teams with a smaller factory, smaller setup, worse wind tunnel, they can't really even spend on that stuff, because otherwise they would massively hinder their performances on this particular season. So this is what a lot of the smaller teams are mentioning, that there really isn't much freedom to improve infrastructure at base, and they're so limited on their capital expenditure. So teams can build new factories, and a specific exemption is in place for wind tunnels, but any other investment such as to improve equipment has to be included in the cost cap limit that it's tough to stay under. So James Vowles from Williams now says that one of the surprises he found when joining Williams was that it lacked a number of the systems that are found at bigger teams such as Mercedes, and that can't be upgraded without eating into the cap, that teams don't really want to do, because that's going to hurt their specific season here in 23 or in another year, for example, if this stays the same, and that, well, affects prize money and all these other things that they want to maintain. And Otmar from Alpine made a similar point and said it solidifies inherent inequities. If you were a small team and didn't have a great wind tunnel and couldn't build one, you'd be screwed forever. That is why there is dispensation for new wind tunnels, which is currently true, but maybe other things have to be considered as well. So Vowles went on to say, I personally think if we want a meritocracy, we need the ability for my team, Williams now, to be given the chance to catch up with some of the big teams and have the same resources. There are some systems I would consider basics, which are in place for other teams and have been for almost 15 years. For example, there are software systems that allow you to probably understand where all your parts are, and they simply don't exist at Williams. As a result of that, what impresses me is that before I joined, they've built the car you see in front of you, 15,000 pieces coming together, fitting, working, and obviously going around the track pretty fast. An incredible accomplishment, but they don't have some of these systems in place that other teams do, and they can't really invest in them because that's going to hurt their specific season now. So they want some changes here, a lot of the smaller teams, to ensure that yes, the cost cap might exist, but if they make investments into their systems to kind of get them on parity with some of the top teams outside of the cap, then maybe that could be excluded, such as, Aston Martin building the massive new factory. That's okay, but maybe other things need to be included as well. So just more drama on the cost cap, and people are pushing for potential changes to the rules as a result. Let's talk about Red Bull then. Carlos Sainz has given his thoughts and said, look, Red Bull are dominating, but they deserve it after doing a great job at building a great car. Maybe Sainz's early bid to try and get Perez's seat, when the time comes. Obviously, he was at the Red Bull kind of academy, right? Now he drives for Ferrari, but maybe he is potentially eyeing up a return in the near future. However, we then get to this Verstappen drama, which seems to be not too far around the corner every Grand Prix weekend. So you guys might remember last year during, I think it was pre-Mexico in Austin, right, when Ted Kravitz made some comment in his notebook and he said that Hamilton was, I think he was discussing the new film that's upcoming, what the Hamilton and Brad Pitt and all this are doing, and he was like talking about the theoretical storyline and synopsis of that film, talking about how the lead character Hamilton might have been robbed and is trying to fight his way back, and effectively discussing the Hamilton Abu Dhabi shenanigans. Now, Verstappen's team were apparently not happy with this, and he individually said that this one specific individual, clearly Mr. Ted Kravitz, had been disrespecting him, I'm not tolerating it anymore, and that they boycotted all Sky Sports interviews for Mexico. They then changed their mind going forwards. The boycott was briefly indefinite, but so the entire Red Bull team, including Horner, so Verstappen obviously wasn't happy. The team stood by him and decided there was going to be a Red Bull-wide boycott of Sky to get their points across. I believe, maybe Kravitz ended up apologizing or whatever it was, and then we went back to business as usual. However, we now get the latest development in this, because after the Grand Prix weekend in Saudi Arabia, Nico Rosberg made his thoughts known on Verstappen and said, basically, Verstappen after the race was talking all this about, it's really frustrating that the team, the reliability isn't good, I don't want to have to be fighting through the field, fighting for second place. We need to do a better job on this type of stuff. And look, Verstappen's got a straight ice-cold killer winning mentality. There's no doubt about it. This guy hates nothing more than being second, it seems. You can understand, that's just the mentality that Verstappen has. But at the same time, I think Rosberg made a reasonable point that maybe it would, pay to be more gracious Verstappen in, okay, the car's done great, the team is great, the car was phenomenal during the race, and okay, they had the issue in qualifying, but he reckons that maybe Verstappen should be more gracious. The other point he made, though, is that Verstappen's comments were not good to see, and that we were also told that he skipped Saturday's team meeting. This is what he said to the media, and look, he probably should have been more careful in making this statement, because the reality was Verstappen was ill in the days prior to the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix weekends, and therefore the team, I believe, allowed him to have that meeting off just so he could maximally recover from his stomach bug that he had over the past few days. So this was allowed by the team. It wasn't like he skipped the meeting because his ego is massive or something. It was a team agreed, mutually agreed thing. So Rosberg should have been more careful about making a statement like that wasn't necessarily backed up by the reality of the situation. So now we get rumours emerging that Verstappen's camp, i.e. Verstappen, his team, and Jos, I imagine his father, are angry with Nico Rosberg for suggesting the world champion skipped a team meeting following his Q2 exit in Jeddah. Now, as I say, there was exemptions granted here because the FIA allowed him to skip media day on Thursday to allow him to recover, and also apparently it seemed to be a mutual arrangement where they allowed him to skip that meeting. So there is anger at Rosberg following bringing this rumour to the attention of the F1 audience, and Sport One say that from their understanding, the Verstappen camp say, this shows how far away from reality Rosberg is. Luckily, Sky also had Ralf Schumacher, I guess, on the German side in the team, who set the record straight away. So yeah, it's another bit of drama, right, that they just can't seem to get away from. And I do wonder whether this man is in part responsible. Is Jos Verstappen on the left-hand side? A lot of the time, Max Verstappen himself, after the Grand Prix, seemed very happy, relatively at least. He was congratulating Perez on the kind of track after they concluded the race, and then after the Grand Prix, talks to Jos Verstappen, and all of a sudden it's all up in arms, oh yeah, the team let me down, all this stuff. I don't know if he just has some influence on Max a little bit to make him seem less likable than he actually is. I don't know. It seems that way to me sometimes in the post-race interviews that Jos has kind of infected Verstappen's opinions. So what do you guys think about this? I believe that Rosberg should have been more careful about making a statement like that if it wasn't, effectively implying that Verstappen skipped the meeting rather than it was an agreed thing. But at the same time, right, it's not a massive deal. I mean, if you go into, if you follow football at all or other sports, some of the stuff that's said in the media about certain players is pretty outrageous, and it's something that, as a driver, you'll just learn to deal with, really. However, when anything, bad is said about Verstappen and his team, it all of a sudden seems like there's drama emerging and, they're threatening boycotts and all this. We saw it last year with Kravitz's comments, and now we might see it again with Rosberg. Now, probably not on this occasion because it seems like they've maybe resolved this, and because Ralf Schumacher on the German broadcast shut down those rumours, they're probably okay, but they're not not happy with Nico Rosberg. And if Rosberg says something more out of line against Verstappen or something on the broadcast, all of a sudden it's the Red Bull Sky Sports broadcast back in action as it was last year. So I don't know, it just seems a bit soft to me, to be honest. Maybe you guys think there's a point behind why Verstappen might be angry, but yeah, I just don't see why it's such a big deal. I know that Red Bull's point though is that because the English broadcast is the global broadcast, they want to ensure that that broadcast remains as unbiased as possible, which I can understand. Like, at the end of the day, I'm sure the Dutch media is pretty biased in Verstappen's favour, as the British media generally is for the British drivers. And Red Bull say, well, the Sky Sports broadcast should be, because it's the international one, it therefore should be unbiased, which is true, but I don't exactly think these comments of Rosberg were biased in any way. It was merely, you know, a mistake on his part, and maybe Verstappen and co have interpreted it that he's trying to downplay his character or success in some way. So I don't know what's around the corner here. Just, you know, some more juicy drama in Formula 1, as there always seems to be. Just one other thing to mention, actually, because Helmut Marko has basically said there's absolutely no way that Perez is ever matching Verstappen this season, because he reckons that Max Verstappen was only operating at about 80% capacity in Saudi Arabia because he was recovering from that stomach bug. Now, that seems overrating it a little bit. It seemed like Verstappen was pretty much fine, but he did reckon that he wasn't at full performance levels effectively that weekend compared to what he will be, and it's going to be a different Verstappen in Australia. So yeah, a funny comment from Marco in a way, because he's like, yeah, Verstappen was only 80% and he fought from P15 to P2 and got fastest lap. So in Australia, this guy's going to be smoking Perez, you know, the entire weekend apparently. But maybe that wouldn't be a massive surprise. But very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.